Because that $1 billion bet was not luck, and it was not a one-time event. In 2020, an electric car company was just weeks away from death. 18 different cities had already looked at it and refused to save it. The company had actually told its own regulators, in writing, that it had serious doubt about whether it could survive the next 12 months. And then one small, relatively unknown Chinese city stepped in, wired it $1 billion, and turned that dying company into one of the biggest names in electric vehicles. The city was called Hefei. It did not just hand over a loan, it took a direct ownership stake in the company. And within about 18 months, it had made a large profit and helped build an entire industry cluster around itself. This was not a bank. It was not a venture capital firm from Shanghai or Silicon Valley. It was the local city government, acting like one of the sharpest investors on Wall Street. In this video, you will learn how China quietly turned its city governments into aggressive, risk-taking investors, why a mayor in China behaves nothing like a mayor anywhere else in the world, and how this hidden machine helped build China's dominance in electric cars, computer chips, and solar power. Because that $1 billion bet was not luck, and it was not a one-time event. It is a deliberate system, running in hundreds of cities at the same time. And once you understand how it actually works, you will see why the West has struggled for years to compete with something it does not even have a name for. Stay with me. To understand why this is so strange, you first have to understand what a mayor normally does. Think about the mayor of a typical Western city. What is their job? They manage the local budget, they fix the roads, run the schools, organize the police and the garbage collection. They worry about getting re-elected in a few years. A Western mayor is an administrator, a manager of public services. The very last thing you would ever expect a Western mayor to do is to take $1 billion of public money and place a high-risk bet on a failing technology startup. If they did, and it went wrong, it would be a massive scandal. Their career would be over. Now, cross over to China, and the picture changes completely, because in China, that is very close to the actual job description. To see how this happened, you have to understand the fundamental design of the Chinese system, and it rests on a combination that sounds almost contradictory. Political centralization paired with economic decentralization. Here is what that means in plain terms. On one hand, the central government in Beijing holds tight political control, and it sets the grand strategic direction for the entire country. Beijing declares the big goals. We must become a technology superpower. We must lead the world in electric vehicles. We must dominate renewable energy. But, and this is the crucial part, Beijing does not micromanage how those goals get achieved. Instead, it hands the actual execution down to thousands of local officials, to provincial governors, to city party secretaries, and to mayors. And then comes the piece that makes the entire machine run, the incentives. For decades, the way a Chinese local official climbed the ladder, the way they earned promotion to a bigger city and more power, was tied directly to one thing above all else: the economic performance of the area they governed. Specifically, for a long time, it came down to a single powerful number: GDP growth. If your city's economy grew fast, you were a rising star. You got promoted. If it stagnated, you were finished. This created something observers have called GDP tournaments. Thousands of local officials, all across China, effectively competing against one another in a giant nationwide contest to see who could generate the most growth. Imagine every mayor in America suddenly told that their entire career depended not on votes, but on how fast they could grow their local economy, ranked against every other mayor in the nation. How would they behave? They would stop acting like administrators and start acting like the most aggressive business developers on the planet. That is exactly what happened in China. This system transforms a local official from a bureaucrat into something much closer to the chief executive of a giant corporation, or the manager of a massive investment fund. The city is their company, its growth is their performance review, and they will do almost anything to make that number go up. So, a Chinese mayor is not just permitted to make giant investments in private companies. They are powerfully motivated to hunt for them, to find the next great industry, back it early, and put their city on the map. And here it helps to understand the financial firepower a Chinese city controls, because it dwarfs any Western city. Chinese local governments control land sales, a massive source of income. They receive profits from state-owned companies. They have extremely close relationships with state-owned banks that can be directed to lend for their projects. And they set up official government investment funds designed to take stakes in private companies. By recent counts, China has established more than 2,000 of these guidance funds, with target capital measured in the trillions. So, a Chinese city is not a sleepy town hall. It is more like a giant, cash-rich investment conglomerate that also happens to run the schools and the roads. And its leader is under enormous pressure to deploy that cash to generate growth. Now, with all of that in mind, let us go back to the story of Hefei and the dying car company, because it is the perfect example of this entire system in action. For most of its modern history, Hefei was considered a bit of a backwater, an inland provincial capital, less than half the size of the glamorous coastal megacities, often overlooked. But Hefei's local government had ambitions, and it had learned to play the investment game brilliantly. Its first legendary bet came years earlier, not on cars, but on screens. In the late 2000s, Hefei made an enormous, risky investment into a struggling display maker called BOE to build advanced factories for producing LCD screens. It was a huge gamble for a city of its size, but it worked spectacularly. That investment helped turn China into a global powerhouse in display panels, and Hefei became the center of a cluster of over 100 related companies, producing a large share of the world's screens. The city reportedly made a return of around 300% on that bet. So, by 2020, Hefei had a proven playbook. Find a promising company in a strategic future industry, one that is starved for cash, inject a huge amount of state money in exchange for ownership, force the company to base itself in your city, and then ride the growth. When the electric vehicle maker NIO came looking for a lifeline, having been turned away by many others, Hefei saw not a risk, but an opportunity. The details are striking. NIO had lost the equivalent of over $1.5 billion in a single year. It was, by its own admission, on the very edge. Hefei led a group of state investors that put in around 7 billion yuan, roughly $1 billion. In exchange, they took a large stake in NIO's core Chinese business. And there was a condition. NIO had to move its entire Chinese headquarters and core operations to Hefei. Think about what the city just did. It did not simply give a struggling company a handout. It acted like a hard-nosed venture capitalist. It used the company's desperation as leverage to seize an ownership stake and to force the company to physically relocate its most valuable operations into the city, creating local jobs, local expertise, and a local industrial anchor. And the bet paid off almost immediately. Stabilized by the cash, NIO's fortunes turned around. Its sales climbed, and its share price soared. NIO turned its first profit in early 21. And here is the truly clever part. Rather than clinging to its stake to control the company, the Hefei government took advantage of the soaring share price and sold off most of its holdings within roughly a year and a half, banking a substantial profit for the city. But the profit on the shares was almost the smaller prize. The bigger prize was that NIO's presence acted like a magnet. It pulled in other automakers, suppliers, and talent. Hefei used its winnings and its momentum to build an entire electric vehicle industrial cluster. In the space of a few years, a former backwater had helped rescue a national champion, made money doing it, and transformed itself into one of China's most important hubs for the industry of the future. And Hefei did not stop there. It went on to apply the very same playbook to computer memory chips, backing a semiconductor champion that is now reportedly preparing for one of the largest public offerings in the sector. Screens, then cars, then chips. The same city, the same method, over and over. This is the machine, and Hefei is not alone. It is simply the most famous example of something happening in cities all across China. This is what some have called the mayor economy, a system where local governments behave like competing investment funds, using vast public resources to chase strategic industries, backing companies directly, and reshaping entire sectors of the global economy in the process. Now, it is important to be honest and balanced here, because this system is not some flawless money-printing miracle, and pretending it is would be a lie. For every brilliant success like Hefei, there are many expensive, quiet failures that you never hear about. When you turn thousands of local officials into aggressive investors, and their promotions depend on visible growth, many of them make reckless, wasteful bets. Cities have poured enormous sums into industries simply because they were fashionable, creating massive overcapacity and duplication. One region's officials would build a semiconductor project, and so would a dozen others, most of them doomed. There are documented cases of local government tech projects collapsing and losing billions. Research suggests that, taken as a whole, these government investment funds have often produced duplicated investments and a great deal of wasted capital. There is also a deeper cost. Because these state investors do not answer to anyone demanding a quick return, they can keep pouring money into a project for years, long after a private company would have pulled the plug. Supporters call this patient capital, and in cases like chip making, that patience can be a genuine strategic weapon. But it can also prop up zombie companies, distort markets, and pile up hidden debt that someone, eventually, has to deal with. China's mountain of local government debt is, in part, a consequence of this very system. So, this is not a simple story of a superior model that the West should blindly copy. It is a story of a genuinely different machine, one that produces spectacular successes and spectacular waste at the same time, often side by side. But here is why it matters so much, and why you should understand it. When you look at China's stunning dominance in the industries of the future, in electric vehicles, in solar panels, in batteries, you are not just looking at cheap labor or clever companies. You are looking at the output of this machine. An entire nation of cities, each one acting like a hungry, aggressive, state-backed investment fund, all competing to build the industries that Beijing has declared important, all backed by enormous financial firepower, and none of them facing the short-term pressures that constrain a private business. The West often struggles to understand how China does this, because the West is looking for the wrong thing. It looks for a single master plan directed from Beijing, or it looks at individual companies. But the real engine is neither. It is thousands of cities, competing like corporations, in a contest designed by the center but fought on the ground. It is a form of capitalism, fierce and competitive, but running inside a communist political shell. It does not fit into the neat boxes of state versus market that the West is used to. And that is precisely why it has been so easy to underestimate. So the next time you see a headline about China leading the world in some new technology, remember the story of Hefei. Remember the dying car company that 18 cities refused, and the one inland city that saw an opportunity, placed $1 billion bet, and won. That is not an accident of history. It is a machine, working exactly as designed, in hundreds of places at once. The most powerful investor in China might not be a bank, or a billionaire, or a fund on the coast. It might just be the mayor of a city you have never heard of. If you found this as fascinating as I did, subscribe, because the real mechanics of how China actually works are stranger, and more important, than almost anything you will read in the headlines. And tell me what you think in the comments. Is this mayor economy a brilliant engine that the West simply cannot match? Or is it a debt-fueled machine of waste that will eventually come crashing down? The most thoughtful answer gets pinned.